so few websites out there that have just basic security like SSL in place, and making that significantly easier, I think, is important. And as we redesign whatever the CA of the future, the certificate authority of the future is, I think we have to keep in mind to make sure that we're not creating this. If you've ever tried to install a certificate, I'm fairly technical, if you ever tried to install a certificate on a web browser, it's a Byzantine process. And we've got to make that easier.
Yes.
Sorry. I'll start with a question, but I'll just probably quickly illustrate an example. How do you deal with the problem when the decisions made in the executive suite are compromising the security? For example, you think about the security architect at a smart grid data collection engine company, who, after all of their effort, outsourced the design and implementation of the chip that went in the smart meter to a Chinese organization. It was a great idea. It cut the per unit cost from $31 to $1 per unit, but it undermined all the security that we put in place. I was a security architect at a social network stock trading company, $4 billion assets under management, direct access to ACH transfers and trading, outsourced all of our development to China, plugged in without any security reviews into our infrastructure. Wells Fargo. I walk in my local Wells Fargo branch in Pleasanton, California. I sent her a PDF attachment. She opens up in Acrobat 9, brings up a browser in IE7 on her Windows XP machine in the local branch. There are a lot of executive decisions that are being made that reward the shareholder, but completely compromise the infrastructure that the architects and the CTOs are trying to implement. How do we address that?
So I think security's got to be an awareness at the top, and we're seeing more and more board level awareness of information security issues. I've been asked to speak to boards and to various organizations. You got to be aware of that. You can't. The more painful it becomes, the less likely people are to make those type of decisions. The role of our chief information security officers within the organization continues to shift and evolve, where it used to be non-existent in most places. In some places, very low level. It becomes more in line with risk and compliance. It becomes less of a technology issue, and it is being factored into business decisions. Companies that don't factor that into their business decision over time are going to get burned.
I think it comes down to changing people's expectations. Right now, there is a lot of education which is going out there that is helping raise awareness at the executive level, but the expectations still haven't switched for a lot of different organizations from maybe we'll get breached and maybe we'll be affected by that, to security being something which is absolutely essential to enable the organization to function on a regular basis. And I think as soon as that expectation changes, that's when you'll start to see more security first minded decisions.
And I just push back slightly on the implication that everything that comes out of China is insecure. I think that's a very dangerous assumption to go down the path of. There are great organizations in China working to really further the security efforts that I actually would trust more than some organizations in the United States, and there are great organizations in the United States that are working on that. So I think I think we have to be extremely careful making these broad generalizations that everything out of a region of the world it can't be trusted.
I would also put that I don't think that'll ever go away. I mean, again, security is never number one in terms of priority, and it will always, in terms of business, come secondary. Now, that being said, I do think we're very early on. I think that as you look forward, where was security 5 years ago, and what were executives thinking about security 5 years ago versus what they are today? I think a lot of that knowledge, that training, a lot of that recognition has moved quite a bit. So if you think in the next 5 years, what the decisions will be made, will security be a part of that? And I think it'll be a lot better than where we are today. But that will never go away. It'll always be that way. But as we see, I think we've made a lot of improvement if you really kind of look back in the past.
Great. Other questions?
Well,
Yes,
following
right
up
here.
that SSL discussion that you had earlier. So it seems to me that we're in a catch-22 with the SSL. On one hand, we want to keep the advanced persistent threats in, impersonating Gmails and whatnot, and add more, enhanced authentication to SSL, there's 2 million sites, and there's a lot of cloud services. As you mentioned, there's no more perimeters, there's defense at the edge. So a lot of the services are being offered through cloud and through SSL, relying on advanced SSL. Well, the challenge is the companies who've been investing in security and monitoring tools, now what are they supposed to do when these communications are happening through SSL, right? So all the investments you've done now become suddenly blind, to the same communication channels to try and solve the advanced persistent threats, right? And that's something we're seeing out there. It's a challenge facing us, including DDoS attacks. There's a lot of DDoS attacks coming, and they're leveraging SSL tunnels to come in. And somebody mentioned spear phishing, right? How are these guys getting in? They're not getting through firewall. They're getting through their layer 8, their users, right? That they go in through LinkedIn, through Facebook, through Twitter, all those other services. So if you're blinding yourself trying to solve a key problem, the advanced persistent threat, and our tools cannot see that, how do we solve that problem?
I'm not sure I understood the question, but I think that there are challenges at both ends. On the high end, if you're Wells Fargo, then we need to have a better CA system that's restricted, and that's what EV certificates and some things we're attempting to do, and I think that there are efforts on that front. On the low end, what I'm actually more concerned about is that there's a ton of e-commerce transactions on small sites. It's somewhat absurd that Facebook started without SSL implemented, and as a result of that, they built into a large service that then made it very hard for them to add SSL after the fact. I want to make it easy for everyone to have SSL on from default at the very beginning.
Okay. Last question.
I'd actually just write about exactly what you're talking about. With the SSL, is it possible to create a fire drill so that all the consumers say, hey, we want SSL, otherwise we're not going to give you our data?
I don't know. I think that all of this is, I think the easier thing would be just to say, how can we secure, SSL in and of itself doesn't ensure data security. SSL solves actually a tiny, small problem of the data security problem, which is, how do I encrypt data as it travels across the line? Does that really matter? Where does that really matter? It matters if you're in a coffee shop, it matters if you're in this office, it matters in the data within your local area network. But in the world of big security problems, that is one tiny little piece of something that is much larger. So, what I would think about is, how do we ensure that companies that put in place password storage systems reevaluate those password storage systems at least annually in order to make sure that they're keeping up with Moore's Law. That's something that we have a regular calendar item that says, okay, on this particular date every year, go back and reevaluate that foundational technology and understand whether or not we have to switch from one technology to another. And we just did. We switched from using salted, hashed, password storage to using bcrypt, which is a more resource-intensive hash. We'll do the same thing where we'll probably shift from bcrypt to scrypt, which is instead of being CPU limited, it's RAM limited. But what I think is more important is that we sort of teach organizations that they have to make regular reevaluations of the fundamental technologies that they have in place. It's going to be, my dad, it's embarrassing. I run somewhat of a security company, and his computer's more infected with things in the world. And there's no way I'm going to change his behavior at some level. And so that's maybe nihilistic of me to think, but that then means that it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that our systems play well in the overall ecosystem and are secure in and of themselves, and don't have seams and problems that are created between them.
So my solution was actually to move my dad to an iPad, and that helped. I think your concept of a fire drill to raise awareness about the use of SSL is an interesting one, because you look at how paranoid most users are, and they're generally